Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Scott. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and Strategist for Disruptive. We're at panel 8 this afternoon, which is basically telco providers and their role in a blockchain platform as a service roles. I'd like our esteemed panel to please introduce themselves. I think that the way we like to start is almost to give us the kind of 30-second sales pitch, as if you were, having a quick interview with somebody that you'd met very, very innocently and quietly on the side of a room. And then if you can just elaborate a little bit around one kind of product innovation in the blockchain space that your organization is working on. Mohammed, if we can start with you.
Hello everyone, my name is Mohammed Arafat and I'm from Appla Blockchain. Blockchain infrastructure as a protocol built from the ground up for governments and enterprises. So what we've essentially done is we're focused on making blockchain application building easy and simple. That's what Appla means in Greek, in short.
One short summary of a project that you're working on, or something that your focus area is, basically?
A focus area is creating the government infrastructure protocol, and we have built an application stack for government departments to function as one single coherent unit.
Cool, brilliant. Manav, welcome.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Manav. I'm from Huawei, and currently in the space of blockchain, Huawei existing, we currently have a public cloud that supports blockchain as a service. And the idea is to replicate the model to the region. If not, then enable our telecom partners to have this kind of capability today.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jose?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Fernandez. I'm a director for IoT and blockchain solutions at Do. I think at Do, we move into the blockchain space quite early compared with other companies in the UE. And today I will try to explain the role that we play in this whole ecosystem as a telco.
Brilliant.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for earlier on. I'm still recovering from a cold. My name is Gonçalo Fernandez, and I'm responsible for having emerging technologies and design at Etisalat. And one of my main roles is also to drive blockchain adoption across not just internally for the consumption of Etisalat, but also in the way that we provide it to the market, complementing our digital platforms to support our customers in their digital transformations.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. I think hopefully we'll have an enlivened panel. I've got hopefully one or two surprises for you as well. But I think we're going to start with sort of an individual question that each of you kind of wanted to cover during our session today. And I'll start with you, Jose, if you don't mind. It's how do you operate within your organization to balance those internal and external stakeholders when you're thinking about a successful blockchain implementation, either within yourself, within your own organization, or to assist a customer company to do so?
Okay, so I think something we heard yesterday and today is that it's clear that blockchain technology is still in a very early stage. As any other evolving technology, this is changing very, very rapidly. And I don't think, it's very rare that one single company can provide an end-to-end solution, okay? So it is important to have strong in-house capabilities, that definitely, you need that. But in order to really deliver value to your customers, you need to fully understand the ecosystem. What I mean with that is you need to understand the market dynamics, you need to understand the underlying technology, you need to understand the user behavior, you need to understand several industries with hundreds of use cases on top of it. Sure. So that's why it makes sense to partner with other key stakeholders along the value chain, because that will bring reduction on the cost of investment. That will allow you to leverage on existing developments. It will bring credibility, especially when you talk about industries like healthcare, financial services, and it could even open the door for new markets. For instance, us as a telco, I mean, we do have the infrastructure that is needed for blockchain to scale, that's clear. We do have the knowledge and experience with managing large amount of data when guaranteeing the right level of privacy. That's our core business, right? We've been doing it for years and years and years. But we are not blockchain experts, and that's the truth. So what we do is we partner with companies, key companies along the value chain, companies like Consensus, companies like Microsoft, companies like Huawei, and in order to deliver these best-in-class solutions. So our strategy is a little bit mix of both. we do invest in-house to build the in-house capabilities, but we do invest to build this strong partner ecosystem to deliver the best solution. Now, looking internally at how you manage that, because it's difficult, right? Because you hear a lot about blockchain, and certainly.
Well, I think there's a kind of a mythical perception around the term around blockchain. Is it Bitcoin? Is it crypto? There's some of the negative connotations have started to infiltrate the discussion, and you need to give your senior management, probably most especially, that kind of assurance that we're doing something that's realistic and solid. And
personally, I think we already passed that phase. I really
Brilliant.
hope so. So
Cool.
I think more or less everybody knows what blockchain. It doesn't matter which industry or sector are you in. You could be in real estate. You could be in healthcare. I think one way or the other, you know about blockchain, even though you don't need to understand really the technology behind, but you know about blockchain. Now, internally, because I speak to a lot of customers, and something the company need to realize that in order to implement blockchain, there is an investment that is needed. And there is an allocation of resources that you need to do in order to make this a reality. So you definitely need that commitment that you mentioned from senior management, but also in order to make this happen, you need full collaboration among the different areas and departments within your organization in order to bring the real value. So you need that.
Sure, and has your organization kind of developed their risk analysis roadmap, their kind of, forgive me, but I come from a banking background, and when there was new product development going on, you had this huge list of compliance requirements that you need to go through, and to the extent that you've built the capability around covering all of the kind of key risk factors, key areas, I mean, has that process been established?
I think everybody needs to do that, right?
Sure.
Because, at the end, PowerPoint and Excel can hold anything. So,
Sure.
That's important to have the idea, to have the vision there. But of course, you need to make the business feasible and viable. So you need to do that analysis. And that's the tough part. I think that, at least for us, the last couple of months, I will say, or even last year and a half, it's been focusing on that, on making sense of those strong business cases that you need to make for those use cases.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. My next question goes to Manav, who's more on the kind of hardware side with a little bit of a software integration kind of basis, and it's really to give your view on blockchain as a service, kind of holistically, like a high level view, not the bottom up approach, rather the top down view of where you see the ecosystem today, what the future looks like, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And really, where are the key gaps almost that we need to start considering in the telco space particularly?
Sure. So as the last speaker would have mentioned, the current market space, I think everybody who's here today, we all understand that blockchain today has really huge potential. There's undoubtedly advantages which the technology comes with, no doubts about it. It's just about the adoption. Now, given that the penetration is less than 2% as of today, and the huge market that is in front of us, the idea is to how can we accelerate this journey? How can we have this journey come to either enterprises or even come to the consumers? Now, telecom in this space acts as a very good role, because they already have the infrastructure, as you mentioned. They already have the technology. Companies like us, as Huawei, we have the technology that can enable the telecoms to enter this place. Now, once you have this ready, once you have the infrastructure ready, now, when we speak about the blockchain, I think it comes down to, 4 stacks. The first one being the infrastructure is in place, which is your server, storage, the mining part of the blockchain.
And I think the cloud is now kind of the acknowledged mechanism for making that happen.
Then comes the network part, which Telecom, of course, has the connectivity. They can have very good peer-to-peer connectivity established between the network participants. And then is the blockchain platform itself. Let's just say the number of nodes, the smart contracts, how are you writing these, and how is the entire orchestration being managed. That is some parts that can come with companies like Huawei to have an entire ecosystem together. And once you have this in place is when the marketplace is open to developers, to the consumers to use, like today Do has officially announced the blockchain platform as a service. It's now, once it has been in the market, it will be open to the developers. Once the developers has done the entire life cycle, it is when it can be open to the consumers to utilize.
Right. And I mean, at Huawei, you guys are operating on that clear partnership model as well. I mean,
Correct.
the acknowledgement that we can't do everything ourselves.
Sure, yeah.
That we need to be integrated,
Yeah.
well, maybe not integrated, but certainly collaboration
Yeah.
with partners. I mean, you.
Yeah, so the idea is, like Jose mentioned, the space itself is humongously huge. It's not something that today, if Huawei has decided to enter this market space, that we can target or we can do it entirely end-to-end. We do realize that right from penetrating the market to establishing an ecosystem itself is not a one company's job. So for the developers of the use case, the adapters, the market promoters, enablers like Do and Etisalat, they all has to come in an entire ecosystem in a marketplace, and that's when the adaptability will start happening. And this is something that Huawei understands. We currently are in the phase of having partners in terms of all the strategic layers, from infrastructure, cloud enablers, telecoms, application providers, and even to a level in which once the blockchain is in place, how does it actually integrate with the current IT system?
Yeah.
So we've gone to the building a partner system at that level as well.
I think that's an important point. I mean, legacy systems are going to be with us
Right.
for a while, right? We're going to have to find a way to get the new tech to talk to the old tech and to, you know, as best we can. I always give this example when I was in the banking world and we were looking at target architecture models for banking. It looked like somebody had dropped a bowl of spaghetti on the floor, and it was kind of, or how all these systems talk to each other. And still problems are going to exist, you know, within the blockchain space to resolve that kind of issue.
So the idea is if we can have an ecosystem built at this particular stage, when the market is still growing, when people are more doing the pilot cases than the actual production cases, this is a stage in which the telecoms, technology providers like us, ISP providers, all this can come in the same page, have all these problems sorted out before the world is ready to have it in the production system as well.
Okay, so you're saying that that test net phase is absolutely critical.
Sure.
Before we get anywhere near the ultimate consumer.
Correct, because eventually, let's just say we do onboard blockchains. I think a very good example these days is healthcare. Now, let's just say we do start putting electronic health records on the blockchain.
Yeah.
The question, the moment you start talking about this, the first question is how do we really integrate with the existing data that we have today on each of the hospitals, the insurance providers, the patient itself.
Sure.
And once you do not have those adapters or those interoperability systems that can integrate your blockchain to this existing IT systems, it would not be much of a success.
Well, I mean, it's healthcare is a interesting use case for me to start with, coming from South Africa and seeing what the problems are with managing data records is quite a great thing. Consola, I want to come to you and just ask you about obstacles in demonstrating value of blockchain internally and externally. And what are the kinds of mechanisms that Etisalat, or you in particular at Etisalat, are working on to create the jump over the obstacle, get through them and take it forward?
I think Jose also mentioned earlier on a bit in terms of the obstacles internally. I beg to differ a bit with him because I still think that education is a big part of the work that we need to do internally, even in our own organizations. Probably do is a bit different. But in Etisalat, one of the things that we also had to put in place was knowledge sessions across the different stakeholders, which are relevant for us to bring the propositions to market in order to educate about what is blockchain and to separate, Paul, like you were saying, this the blockchain and DLT technologies from the overall crypto discussion.
Yeah.
And this was especially true during the last months of the year, where you see a lot of pressure on crypto, and suddenly every time you go to project a project on blockchain, the discussion swiftly turns into cryptocurrencies and evaluations. So basically, within Etisalat, what we do is about education and towards to our customers in the same way. So we do also believe that this is a joint ecosystem effort, not a single vendor approach. That's why you see here two competing telcos sitting in the same panel. This is part of the ecosystem building part that we think that that needs to happen. And then it's about trying to find the path of least resistance where we can deliver more value in terms of using blockchain with less obstacles. And in our case, for example, internally, when you think about telecom providers and blockchain, the two use cases that pop to mind is always about international roaming payments, where you have clearing, settling houses doing intermediary roles, or for example, identity as a service, because of all the knowledge that we have about our customers. We, on purpose, due to also to the regulation that we are operating under, we stood clear of this. So for example, what we are doing is we have our loyalty program called Smiles, and we are tokenizing the points in Smiles in order to be able to drastically improve the settlement payment to our retailers that are part of the program, growing from weeks to hours in terms of settlement, but also by being able to open this loyalty program to third parties so they can actually interact with our point system and create an easy way to exchange without, again, going into the crypto currency side of things. Externally with customers, we found a very interesting use case around trade finance, where we are with one of the leading UAE banks developing a solution to reduce trade finance fraud. We recently had an event at Etisalat where we had 60 people for the 15 major banking institutions across the UAE. And this is a use case that were craftily researched before, where everybody has a positive incentive to join, because it's about reducing fraud reduction across. So I think by a combination of picking the right use case to use, as well as educating all the different stakeholders from customers to internal, I think this is the key that we are trying to push in order to foster adoption.
Sure, and I'm really glad you touched on the tokenization of a reward program, because I think that part of our education in general to the entire market around the opportunity for blockchain is to help people understand that something like Air Miles or Voyager Miles or something like that is in fact a token-based system. You know, we have so many tokenized offerings in the world already that haven't been labeled correctly as a token offering. That the minute you say token offering to somebody who's got a small amount of dangerous knowledge about blockchain and crypto, it's automatically, oh, that's a scam, there's a problem, it's all this crypto, it's obviously going to get ripped off. And I think as we continue that education into the terminology and what it really means, will add a tremendous amount of value.
Absolutely. And for example, you touched on the loyalties. We also see, for example, with the Dubai government moving ahead with the Dubai points. So it's very easy to create a system in which through smart contracts you can easily convert points from one loyalty system to another. And this in the end will enhance the results that each organization has, which has the adoption and how useful are these systems to their own customers. So this is clearly an easy win without getting into stable coins or other a type of cryptocurrencies to be able to do the exchange.
Completely, thank you. Mohammed, I want to turn to you now, and given what your organization is managing to achieve, certainly in the kind of bigger problem spaces, almost the blockchain infrastructure kind of spaces at government sort of level, land registry, you know, voting, all of those kinds of big things that are always quite critical to those of us from the African continent, where property rights are always incredibly difficult to track, is what's the kind of key characteristics that we need to start thinking about in blockchain infrastructure as a service, if we want to now take it to the next level, away from just blockchain as a service, but the actual infrastructure to do that big heavy lifting? Because I think a lot of projects are focused on a specific use case within a use case within a use case within an industry almost, and you guys are looking at that big hairy monster. I mean, what are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about?
The first step is, like you rightly mentioned, one of the key issues in Africa is, I'm trying to relate this to what you just asked, is establishing a universal digital identity.
Right.
So one of the key issues in Africa is 1 out of 4 African is a Nigerian.
Right.
But statistically, I mean, realistically, that's not the case. They just hold the Nigerian passport, but they're not born in Nigeria, right? And this leads to a lot of pressure on the Nigerian economy and so on and so forth. So first step is establishing a digital identity. That's the layer that we need to get it right.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a telecommunications, there's a full-on infrastructure beneath that's required. I mean, it's okay to have the blockchain layer on it, but how does what your guys are doing kind of feed back into that?
The way we treat blockchain is it's not just as a software. Like we mentioned, it's treated as an infrastructure, as in it gives access to a country's resources,
Right.
an asset, and all of the things that an economy is economy makes things accessible to its public. So that's what we are focused on, creating a layer wherein assets are digitized, resources are accessible, and channels are established.
Yeah.
So even the previous keynote speaker, what he was demonstrating is roads and caravans. So blockchain is going to be that infrastructure in which this upcoming economy will thrive on.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then I guess you get into the things around managing, once you've established that single point of digital identity, then you get taxation, voter rolls, all of those kinds of things become,
Yes. So
become
these are going to be
a lot more easier to pivot along.
True. These are going to be protocols embedded within the smart contract as smart law over the ecosystem.
I love that term. It's the first time I've heard of it. So
Smart law?
yeah, I promise not to not to take it on, but
No problem. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a governing smart contract.
right.
So when you need to change a law, one of the key things even Gartner mentions is that blockchain is going to bring in the advent of a programmable economy.
Right.
Now, this age, the economy is seeing such trends which was not foreseen before. Thereby, we need these tools and agility to respond to the economic conditions. And that's where you need a programmable economy. And you need an infrastructure where you can tweak and respond to the economy.
Yeah.
And that's what blockchain does. A smart law is that governing protocol where you can tweak it accordingly and respond to the stimuli of the economic conditions.
I mean, I guess you rely on honest participants to be engaged as well, which in certain countries we understand is tricky to find. However, it's almost, if the population imperative starts to become such that we demand these things, then hopefully that the cycle will change over time.
Yeah, we can take a leaf from what the Dubai government has done, as opposed to the other governments who are rolling out regulations on cryptocurrencies and other blockchain projects. Dubai government is establishing the blockchain tech within the government stack itself first. And then they would establish the industry standards later, once the government core infrastructure is laid down.
Sure.
And then we can look at the sharing economy gig coming up on top of this infrastructure.
Yeah.
And thereby, we need to see a leadership taking leadership, taking the first step and setting the vision right for this.
Completely. Cool. Thank you very much. I want to direct the next question at both Gonzalo and Jose, just around the regulatory environment. I know that your entities are largely operational in the Gulf kind of region, and Dubai is clearly taking the lead in terms of blockchain reg and the way that it's building its own government stack, as Mohammed was referring to. I just want to get a little sense from both of you on the, if you agree or disagree, and I'm a fan of a little bit of disagreement, I must confess, so thanks for that earlier, Gonzalo, is to just give me your sense on what that roadmap kind of looks like, and when you're thinking about expanding into different markets where perhaps the degree of difficulty goes up a little bit, sort of how you think about overcoming some of those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to regulation, I'm a bit thrown from one side. I also believe in free market and regulation to some extent. But when it comes to driving the initiatives around blockchain, I do recognize that sometimes the lack of clear regulation can be a barrier in terms of investments, especially from a startup point of view. Now, that being said, part of the work that we do at Etisalat is also to work together with regulators. When you look at typical blockchain deployments, either you have an industry-specific use case, like I mentioned, for example, in trade finance, and then you need to follow the regulatory environment of that use case. So, for example, when we are working with banks, we are following all the regulation from the banking sector and making sure that what we are doing in blockchain is compliant. The same way, internally, as telcos, we need to follow our regulator in terms of data privacy and so forth. So we tend to comply to all the regulations that are already in place. But we do engage in these conversations with the regulators, not just from the telecom side, but also in terms of other industries, to make sure that the education is there. And this conversation is easier if you're talking about DLTs and a private or consortium basis blockchain, it gets a bit more difficult, again, once you go into the crypto
Yeah,
and
I
currency
think
side of things.
talking about those kinds of other industries you need to engage with, Jose, is the kind of financial services too. I mean, telco is one layer. There are 3 or 4 really critical industries that need to come along the journey almost at a similar speed. If one pushes ahead too quickly, it's going to, you know, frustrate the others who are trying to go along at their own pace. I mean, how do you deal with interacting and engaging and kind of managing those compliance issues with other
Okay,
industries?
if I can come back to that
Yes, of
question,
course.
just elaborate a little
Sure,
bit more on that one.
Sure.
I agree with Gonzalo that the frameworks, these holistic frameworks and the standards are not there yet, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of work needs to be done.
Right.
But I think Mr. Osman Sultan in his opening keynote yesterday mentioned that in order to blockchain to scale, really, there are 3 factors, right? What's the technology factor? Clearly, we're not there. I mean, blockchain is in an early stage. A lot of work, even though it's been evolving quite fast, it's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
But if you ask me for the kind of projects or use cases that we've seen, most of the time, what we have is good enough. And I'm serious with that.
Is good enough. Yes.
Sometimes, most of the time, yes.
Yeah.
Most of the time, yes.
Cool.
Regulation side, still, we're not there yet, but we have some guidelines available already. Some sectors could be more difficult to manage. Healthcare, financial services are more complex with the kind of data, the sensitivity of the data you manage.
They have their own regulatory environment.
But somehow we are there as well in one way or the other. And now the real challenge comes with the human factor, the society factor, right? The change in mindset. And that's where we see the biggest stopper here in all implementation. We're trying to do the work we're doing with the customers, right? Because this change in mindset about the sharing of information, about collaboration, that's not there yet. And that's, I think, one of the areas we need to focus the most. I think when you compare with the region, with other countries, I mean, Dubai and UAE, I think is no question that's been leading the discussion on blockchain. And it's been like that for the past few years. Regarding the guideline definition, regarding the technology push they're doing for this, a lot of work needs to be done. In terms of maturity of the sectors, definitely there are some of them, like financial services. Those use cases, I think they're more mature. Maybe because of the link with cryptocurrencies or for other reasons, but they're there. There are other sectors that are getting there, and I'm talking about education, I'm talking about healthcare. So the work's being done across the entire, you know.
I just want to add something. I agree with Jose, but I think that sometimes the challenge comes when the use case that we are trying to implement crosses industries. So, for example, if we are talking about something that goes from fintech to health, then that's where the regulatory complexity comes into place, because sometimes meeting all the regulatory requirements for each of the specific industries involved, it gets really complex, and that sometimes it's new territory. But I totally agree in terms of the human factor to it. That's why earlier on when I was mentioning that one of the things that we take great care of is in understanding the use cases where there is a positive incentive for everyone to collaborate. And that, I believe, is a role that a telecom provider can bring in order to put together the governance and build the consortiums of sometimes competing entities. As I was alluding to before, when we set 60 people from the 15 major banks in the UAE, these are competitors in their own nature, like we are in our own industries. So our ability to remain that neutral partner and identify that use case that actually is contributing value, not just shifting value from one side or another of the value chain, but actually generating value for everyone, is a key role that we as telecom providers can provide.
Thank you. I mean, I want to just expand it away now out of the region almost to bring in Manav and Mohammed, just to get your views on what you see in the other markets that you play in from a regulatory perspective. Who's a little bit ahead, who's lagging, what kind of gaps have they got? I mean, just to broaden the conversation now a little bit, if you can.
Yeah, so, go on. Definitely, we, especially this region, I think the hype only started about when Smart Dubai initiatives and then, you know, the whole UAE government and the Dubai government came along saying that we have to adopt this technology. Now, when it comes to use case basis and then how the regulatory has to be maintained for that, when fintech came into picture, and today still is one of the leading use cases of blockchain, be it cross borders, be it inter banking system, There's always this question that while we do write smart contracts and they are in place, and then, of course, two entities would have agreed to the smart contract, but what if there is a standoff between them? What if there is a standoff between two entities who did agree to a sort of a smart contract, but now they're not agreeing to this particular situation?
Right.
How do we do that? In case of a regulatory authority, in this case being absent, just like there was also a gentleman from KSA for CBB, if that regulatory is absent in this case, the standoff will continue to take place and this technology would cease to exist. So while we say that as the technology should be as open as it could possibly be, at the same time there is, I believe, a really need to be having a regulatory authority, and this not really in terms of fintech itself. Let's just say healthcare. When it comes to healthcare, there are entirely new issues that we have to cater of, from data privacy issues to how do we share data between, let's say, two hospitals, and then eventually, especially in this region, when an expat comes, he has to do health checkups, and that is very closely associated with his residencies, with his visa. So how are we managing that on an interministerial level between the hospitals, and of course making sure that the rights of the patient itself, the rights of the citizen is in place? So I think it's a very must to have a regulatory authority for all the sections. Moving forward to what kind of use cases can we begin with, given the challenges that we currently have today? I think if it is something which is within the organization, some kind of blockchain that has a parent organization and the sub-department. The other day we were discussing with my boss that eventually there could be a there could be a blockchain case in which there'll be no need of managers. It'll be incentivized based, you do this particular job, and then this is how your incentives will be. These kind of use cases wherein the role of regulatory would not be as significant as possible. I think these are the few ones that I see as immediate adoption of blockchain.
Sure.
So regulatory aspect, I mean, it's very broad, but like Manav mentioned, when it is inter-department, inter-organization, it's up to the organization.
Sure.
And when it comes to the industry-wide, like healthcare, it's complex. Dubai, and classifying it, which region is doing, Dubai is doing pretty good stuff in terms of government adoption. And when it comes to cryptocurrencies and all of those side of the blockchain ecosystem, we have Malta stepping in, we have Singapore. So yeah, I mean, regulation is a very broad area, and we're going to see blockchain is a new way of doing things.
Right.
And we still need to see how things are done. We need to see more failure cases for them to come up with a successful model, for regulators to be able to define the entire 9-yard.
I mean, when you say failure cases, do you mean people perhaps people don't need to lose money, but we need to see that that some of the thinking has not been validated correctly and needs to be rethought through?
Using blockchain, it's a realignment of how you deal with each other and how the transaction has been done. So that's what I mean by failure rate. I mean, we might think this model might succeed, and put in trial doesn't really succeed.
Right.
So that's what I mean by
Could we argue that some of the failed kind of ICOs that we've seen over the last couple of years are starting to build that failure case?
Absolutely.
I mean, as an agency, we believe that the why is absolutely critical, and the what and the how should follow, whereas perhaps the industry has gone into the what too soon without pulling out the actual core message that would keep people involved.
True. So ICOs is a great example of how blockchain could be used to bring in agility towards a crowdfunding and the sharing economy, per se. And going forward, we realize that a regulation definitely needs to step in, and STOs completely regulated would be the next IPO for specific economies to thrive on.
No, I think the case for an STO is actually pretty well made, certainly with the intellectual capital that will come into the ecosystem as well, because you'll get those ex-investment bankers, VC funds and the like coming into the industry that will arguably professionalize some of the aspects of the industry that have needed to be done. So I think in closing, I'd like to just ask each of you kind of what is kind of your timeline and summary future outlook for for blockchain within your businesses to the extent that it's, you know, is it full adoption in 5 years? Is it a 15-year game? Is it 30% by X period of time? You know, it's, Jose, I'll start with you again. If you just give the audience a sense of what does the future look like, and you don't have to go, you know, into the 10-year, but
like I started saying, like we've been in this blockchain space for a few years now, and this exploration or testing phase, for us, we were trying to find our position, just like any other company, within the ecosystem, right? Now, after all those implementations and POCs and work we have done on the testing side, it's clear for us that we should play the platform enablement role, right? As telcos, that's what it makes sense. We have what it takes. We have the infrastructure, the cloud offering. Last year during GITEX, we announced our blockchain platform as a service, a platform we're building with a strategic partner consensus. And basically what we're trying to bring to the market is a shared environment that all entities, government and private, can use and to build any sort of application and any use case on top of it. So this platform will be a self-managed tool that they can use to create their nodes, create their network, use the tools and functionality within that platform, and what we're trying to do is make it easy for everyone to embrace this technology. That's our priority, play the platform role. It doesn't mean we are not going to work on specific verticals.
Of course.
But we see we can bring value, right?
Yeah.
And also in GITEX, we showcase one use case regarding the attestation of documents. You know, today when you study abroad, you need to attest that a document with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a tedious process, a long process to get a rubber stamp. Now by using blockchain, you can instantly get that document into the blockchain and share it with any potential employer, with other universities, and so on. And just yesterday, we announced another use case we have, the first use case in our BPaaS on the healthcare industry, which is the patient safety use case. Basically, what we're doing, we're using blockchain, NFC tags, and NFC tags to trace the pharmaceutical products and blood bags to know their provenance and their status in a whole value chain.
Yeah.
So again, we see Sure definitely playing this enabling role with the platform, and we'll keep working on some specific verticals that we value on.
Manav, in Huawei?
Yeah, so how Huawei sees the whole adoption of the blockchain in the current market space is, there are two aspects that we currently look onto. So one is the adoption of blockchain, let's say, to a citizen itself. Now that we see on an entirely different level, because that comes with the user experience. Like today, the citizen or the resident would not even know what is a blockchain. If you give him the experience, let's just say, like he was mentioning, the document attestation system, or if you can import or export his healthcare data, or when he goes to the supermarket and then he scans a QR code, and then he sees that, okay, this vegetable or this particular meat came from Germany or from Europe, and this is what the temperature it's maintained. So if it comes to the B2C level, I think it's, the adoption is as soon as the user experiences.
Right.
It will only come into a matter of months or years by the time the technology enablers enable the citizen to have these kind of features. At the same time, when it comes to a B2B kind of a scenario, so Huawei is very aggressively working towards, like I said, building the ecosystem environment. We see the only key factor to a real success in terms of blockchain is the collaboration and synergy. Now, while tens of thousands of companies, ICOs, we've seen them going out, few of them really giving a good success rate, and at the same time, as we were discussing, few of them have really failed.
Sure.
The whole idea is how this technology, which was initially developed to be a prosperous for everyone, for citizens, for governments, and also for the enterprises, how can we make that happen? This can only happen when, let's just say, the wisdom is shared, the knowledge is shared, and so have the failed cases. Yeah. What has something gone wrong in a particular use case, and why has it gone wrong? And this is something when we collaborate, when it's an open market, it's an open ecosystem, is when people would realize that, okay, this is something, it was promising, but it really didn't go through. Right. And this is something, it has shown success, and it has potential to have much more success. Cool. So the idea that Huawei follows today is a much open level of collaboration in terms of strategy, in terms of different verticals that we're trying to go in, as well as the platforms itself.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Gonzalo?
Yes, so from my point of view, I think that the last 2 years were the years where we saw a lot of proof of concepts being deployed across the enterprise spectrum. So when we look forward to the year and the years ahead, we think that this will lead from the transition from actual POCs to actually working environments. And a lot of changes that are happening right now in terms of blockchain technologies, as we are improving in terms of consensus mechanism, going from intensive proof of work to proof of authority or even proof of stake, will also help in terms of the adoption of the private and consortium-based blockchains. For us, from an Etisalat perspective, we don't see so much the platform or the cloud as the only differentiating that we can bring into the market. Most of the hyperscalers already are deploying blockchain platforms as a service, as does SAP, HP, Huawei. So we also have that. We are a strategic partner of Microsoft. We are deploying Azure here in the region. So through that, we also can provide that platform as a service level for blockchain, which was good for the earliest years where companies were trying just to put together some quick POCs. What we find now is that the friction point is more internally towards their internal and legacy systems. And this is where we help with the partners like Advanza to help companies understand how to integrate their existing applications in a very seamless and easy way to a blockchain environment if we are picking the right use case. So our efforts are on working together with the different industries in identifying the relevant use case, and with our partners, Advanza, as well as other partner ecosystems like Microsoft, to be able to deploy this network.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Last word to you, Mohammed.
I think the adoption would, I believe the adoption would go with a combination of, like Manav mentioned, the user experience, the standardization, and the regulatory authorities' creation of that framework. So to start with, we could look at, like Jose mentioned, the attestation of all kind of certificates in your education industry, your supply chain, your trade, any kind of certificate attestation would be the first layer that would be the first use case that would be adopted first. And then we all are moving towards a cashless society. And that's where the major application of blockchain comes in again, where you have individual wallets, where you can do microtransactions. We can look at China for that. WeChat and Alipay been done on a global level.
Yeah.
So first thing, attestation, and then the financial services. And later it would be, we can look at the emerging markets like African market and Middle Eastern market, adopting the tech at the infrastructure level.
Right.
And looking at the success and the ease of what value the system delivers, other countries would migrate towards this. So that's the idea.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think I've really enjoyed moderating our panel. I've learned quite a lot, which is always good. Every day is a school day, as we say in our country. I'd like to thank our panelists. In summary, I think we're all wandering around the halls of the conference for the next couple of hours, so please stop by and say hello. And I think in closing, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope it was informative for the crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.